This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
A very good welcome to the Late Late Show with me, Tracey, Leese. Coming up this evening, I'm going to be talking to author and mentoring aficionado Hayley Hughes about the future of ITT. I'm live from Staffordshire for the next hour, and I would love to hear from you tonight.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles, and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The Morning Star reports on claims being made by the union Unison that school support staff are using their own money to help pupils and families cope with crippling living costs. A survey of more than 6,000 workers, including teaching assistants, caterers, cleaners and librarians, reveals that many are helping students buy food, uniform items, shoes and stationery. The findings were published to coincide with the union's annual celebration of school support staff, known as Stars in Our Schools. The survey also indicates that 98% of those questioned are concerned that their own pay is not enough to cover the spiralling cost of living. 1 in 8 workers say they have used food banks within the last year, and 27% have taken second or even third jobs to help make ends meet. 50% of those polled also said they were actively seeking other jobs in order to achieve higher pay. In Scotland, the EIS union has announced 16 more strike days planned for next year, as it continues to put pressure on the Scottish Government to increase pay. The action will take place over 16 consecutive days in January and February, with teachers in 2 local authorities walking out each day. The first day of strike action was held on Thursday the 24th of November. A further national strike day is planned for the 10th of January for primary, special and early years establishments, and the 11th of January for secondary schools. Unions stated that further action was required because of a lack of willingness to negotiate by government. In related news, an estimated 70,000 university workers embarked on strike action over pay and working conditions. Those striking included researchers, academics and administrators, as well as caterers, cleaners and other support staff from Unison and Unite unions. The university and college unions say that staff are at breaking point due to poor pay, working conditions and job insecurity. It is thought the industrial action has affected as many as 2.5 million students, and is being reported as the biggest strike in UK higher education history. Further action is planned for next week. The strike action is being supported by the National Union of Students, but Robert Halfon, Minister for Skills, Apprenticeships and Higher Education in England, described the action as highly disappointing and urged all sides to work together to reach a solution. Staying with higher education, Universities UK has released a statement in response to speculation that the UK government may look to reduce international student numbers. It comes after Downing Street said PM Rishi Sunak is considering a variety of options to control immigration, including looking at the issues of student dependence and low-quality degrees. The comments followed data indicating higher net migration up to June 2022, with foreign students being one of the biggest driving forces. Vivian Stern, MBE, Chief Executive of Universities UK, said, "Cutting international student numbers would run directly counter to the government's strategy to rebuild the economy." She went on to say that international students make a net positive contribution of at least £26 billion per year and sustain jobs in towns and cities around the UK. The full statement can be found on the Universities UK website. Over the last few weeks, we've reported regularly on the World Skills competition, and this week the results of the UK national finals were revealed. FE Week carries full details of the story, but the results were broadcast from Channel 4's Steph's Packed Lunch studio. Steph McGovern announced over 200 bronze, silver and gold medal winners across 63 categories. In total, 217 young people were recognised, up from 186 last year. The competition highlights the vital role of colleges and organisations offering apprenticeships in growing a high-value skills economy, as well as supporting young people to achieve excellence in their chosen field. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, it's the longest, darkest term. It's cold, it's wet. You go to work in the dark, you come home in the dark. Is there any tech out there that can help us get through this term? Of course there is! Meditation is known to give you a healthy mindset, and the knock-on effect from that is better well-being. The Muse headband can help you on your mental health journey by bringing meditation into your daily routine. It monitors your brain activity during meditation sessions, which you can view using the Muse app. The headband itself uses a sensor to provide feedback on how your mind works as you meditate, ensuring you keep your mind focused and on meditation itself, not exterior problems or thoughts. After your session, the band uses the data collected on your brain activity to provide advice on how to control your breathing better and reach your calm space during sessions. Impact on the pocket is big, with this device weighing in at over £200, and I'm not sure it'll help you block out any wet break times, but it might be something to consider for when you get home. Okay, meditation may not be your bag. How about being able to get to sleep faster? And I don't mean the go to bed and be asleep before you hit the pillow. I'm talking about trying to get back to sleep when you wake up in the night and your brain starts racing. Definitely something for the more sensible budget. At £30 to £40, the Dodo is a little device that claims to be able to get you to sleep in 8 minutes. It uses light to encourage deep, calming sleep. With a bit of further research on a popular shopping site, I found out that over half the reviews said it worked for them, and a few reviews that were negative seemed to lack perseverance. Want a free way to just vent? Instead of inflicting your day on colleagues or loved ones, why not make a journal or blog? Keep it to yourself or put it online for the world to see. Obviously, you may not want to identify yourself in a public forum, but having a good old rant is known to make you feel better. You never know. You may even find a solution to the problems you're having while reflecting. There are lots of free blogging tools out there, or even create a profile or group on social media. Get it off your chest. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have any tech for well-being? Let us know at TTR 2022. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
I'm just going to introduce Hailey, who I think is going to call in very, very shortly. So Hailey is a mentoring aficionado. She will be, I'm sure, if you are a teacher Twitter fan like me, you will see her posts. I think she's been in a Twitter row tonight, so maybe she'll talk to us about that. So we're going to speak to Hailey about all things teacher training. So just for some context, just to recap what we've just said, we know that ITT providers have had to have reaccreditation, and we know this is going to present challenges. We know that there are some previous ITT providers who are no longer going to be allowed to deliver ITT, as a model. So the future of ITT is very much up in the air. It's very much open for debate. And if you've got a question of Hailey, we would love for you to text in tonight. Hailey, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh my goodness. Thank you. I've never been more relieved to hear another person's voice in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on Teachers Talk Radio lots of times with people of varying experience of lengths of show. So don't worry, these aren't the only technical issues I've ever come across. So it's all been good.
Do I seem worried? Yes, very. I have been. Okay. I'm absolutely thrilled that you are here tonight and you're going to share some of your wisdom around ITT with the listeners this evening. So I've already prefaced this by saying about, the change that's happening around ITT, the market review. So I wonder if you could just start by telling us a little bit about your experience and a little bit about how you're going to frame your responses tonight. So what's your experience that positions you as something of an authority around ITT and mentoring?
Well, I don't know whether I'd call myself an authority, if I'm completely honest. I'm just, somebody working in teacher development trying to make a difference, like everybody. So I certainly wouldn't call myself a sort of guru of mentoring because I've still got a lot to learn. So, I mean, my background is that I was a teacher of English for 15 years. I had been a middle leader, a senior leader in schools. Prior to becoming a teacher, I was a national newspaper journalist. So this is sort of my third career change now, really. I'm starting to think that I have zero longevity at all in anything.
Or maybe every bit of longevity. Maybe that's the key.
Maybe get very bored. I don't know. So I did sort of teaching for 15 years and didn't leave the profession because I was disgruntled with it in any way, actually. I left because I was increasingly being asked to come and speak at schools. And obviously when you've got a full teaching timetable and you've got students that are relying on you to be there and to teach them, I can't just swan off and speak at schools here, there and everywhere. So I essentially needed to do something that enabled me to actually get out there and learn more and connect with other people. And I felt a little bit stifled, if I'm completely honest, in a school, which was why I left. So I wasn't kind of disgruntled and, hated my job, hated kids, anything like that. I was desperate to get away. So I've been in ITTE, as it's sometimes referred to, now for about 16 months. So I'm very new, still in it. I have a strange position in ITT. I'm not a senior lecturer who teaches PGC students. I don't have any contact with trainees at all, pretty much. My job title is that I'm a principal lecturer of professional development and mentoring. So essentially, I think I'm probably the only principal lecturer of mentoring in England. So maybe somebody will ring me in and tell me I'm wrong. I don't know. But I think I am.
I'd like to see them try, frankly.
You know what? I'm sure they will after the night I've had. But yeah, so that's kind of my job. So in a nutshell, I strategically lead mentoring training and mentor development and professional development in the education faculty at the University of Sunderland. So that's kind of my job. And I'm still obviously very new to this. I'm learning, and alongside that, I also have another full-time job where I work as head of education at Iris Connect. So again, strategically leading their professional development content and their sort of education strategy. So yeah, I have my hands quite full, to be honest.
Yeah, and I feel like you've got a lot of fingers in a lot of pies. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. To be honest, I'm one of those people who never really says no to anything, and sometimes that comes and bites me in the backside. I'm not going to lie. I have moments like this evening where I think I kind of wish I was back in my classroom making a difference to young people.
Yeah, so what has happened on Twitter tonight? Did somebody call you an expert or something?
No, it's nothing in particular. It wasn't even a big deal. It's basically people who ask lots of questions, asking questions, and I just didn't have the patience to deal with it because I'm tired. So it's not a big deal, but I think sometimes people forget when you've got a lot of followers, or you've got like a big follow account or whatever, that there are human beings behind the accounts.
Yeah.
And, my husband's been away for 11 days and I've been looking after 2 kids on my own with 2 full-time jobs, and I'm just tired.
Yeah.
I just haven't got the mental capacity, like many people at this time of year, to answer relentless questions about things that don't matter at like 8 o'clock at night when I should be spending time with my family. And to be honest, that's my own problem, because I just need to get off Twitter. So I was joking with Kate Albridge earlier that I just do long for the days when I was a teacher, making a difference in my class, and I didn't have a Twitter account. And do you know what? The world didn't implode.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can get quite frustrating, I think.
Well, we're really glad that you're here tonight. And I personally am a fan. I'm going to own it. I'm going to be unashamed in that. I think you already know that, because I sent you my book with a little kind of love letter.
Yeah, it's a fabulous book.
Okay, well, thank you so much. For those of you just tuning in, so I've got Hayley Hughes. She's an author speaker. She's the head of education at Iris Connect. She's the author of the bestseller Mentoring in Schools. And we're going to talk tonight about the future of ITT. We're over the technical difficulties and we are going to proceed. Okay, so Hayley, I'm going to launch straight into some questions, if that's okay. But just before I do, just so we're like talking about the same kind of framework, there's some kind of alarming data coming through about teachers coming into the profession. So we already know of the national teacher crisis, but the current kind of figures that were published in September of people applying for ITE, are around about a third down, according to an article in The Guardian. So that's the kind of starting point that we're working from this evening. So with that in mind, Hayley, from your experience, why is ITT so important? Why is it this big area of focus currently in the profession?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of ITT is under a microscope at the moment, and the reason being it stems from a piece of research that the Department for Education did in 2018, where they suddenly went, oh my God, teachers are leaving the profession in droves and we don't know why. So they did a big piece of research on it and uncovered that one of the reasons that people, 1 in 3 were leaving before they'd served 5 years in the classroom was that they didn't feel like they had been supported in their early career. And not only this, they felt the gulf between what they were learning in their PGCE or SCIT or however they came into teaching, and between actually being a classroom teacher. I think it's Daisy Christodoulou who calls it like the knowing-doing gap. And, I remember reading this research. I wrote a book on it, Preserving Positivity, and I remember reading it and thinking, well, you could have paid me millions and I would have told you this without the research. Because I think for years, I think experienced teachers in particular, actually forgetting even trainees and ECTs, have felt like there's been a lot of issues with being a teacher, down to workload, poor work-life balance, the list is endless. So, this research, it wasn't groundbreaking.
Yeah, and I think we probably anecdotally, that isn't a shock, is it, when you hear that?
No, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this opened my eyes. But what came from that is obviously that thing that was then caught onto, which was that fact that people in their early career didn't feel supported, and that there was that big gulf between kind of, training and an actual practice. So what came from that then was the DFE's recruitment and retention strategy in 2019, which then birthed the early career framework, the core content framework, and the ITT market review as well. So it's been a whole kind of few years of a raft of very fast-paced policy change in teacher development, and some of it was needed, and it won't make me popular for saying it. But some of it has been heavy-handed, and it's left a lot of people in the sector wondering why on earth they bother, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that, the gulf between training and the job. I mean, I don't know how you came into the profession, but I was a PGCE, and I breezed it because I'd worked full time, and it was a doddle. I mean, it wasn't a doddle. There were obviously quite a lot of demands, but in comparison to working in a low-paid job where I couldn't even afford to be ill, I found it manageable. But then my NQT year, I remember, was extremely, extremely difficult, and actually probably well-being took a real kind of nosedive.
Yeah, I mean, similar story really. I'd come from being a national newspaper journalist in London, so my workload was ridiculous. Like I never had any holidays. I remember taking Christmas Day off once and turning my phone off and turning my phone back on to like on Boxing Day to hundreds of abusive voicemail messages from the features editor because there'd been a tsunami in Asia, and obviously news doesn't wait. So the thought of having kind of 12 weeks paid holiday a year was just bonkers to me before I came into the profession. So similar to you, was fine on my PGC. I had a small baby when I did it as well, but then sort of NQT year, a lot of the things, and remember I trained sort of 16 years ago, a lot of
Yeah.
taught on my sort of PGC were at the cutting edge of research at the time, and obviously are things that may have been debunked now possibly. And I just felt the gulf between, okay, I've gone from being sort of this PGC student having sort of 2 placements and doing okay, sort of babysitting others' classes or whatever with them in the back of the room, and now suddenly I have all of my own classes and all of the accountability as an English teacher is on my shoulders, and it's a bit terrifying, to be honest. I often use the analogy of walking out onto kind of a boardwalk and seeing, this big lake in front of you and wondering how on earth you're going to get to the other side. And I didn't have a rubber ring, and I feel like the early career framework is trying to be that rubber ring. I don't think we've 100% got it there yet, and maybe we'll talk a bit more about that later.
Yeah.
Some consistency is better than nothing in some respects.
It's so interesting that you used a water analogy, because my go-to analogy for that first year for me was about treading water.
Yes.
And I found it really lonely as well. And I think that is something that the ECF has got right, is connecting early career teachers with each other, whether it's in the face-to-face sessions or just within your own schools and networks. I think that is something that ECTs need.
And it's a delight to see, because I should have mentioned at the beginning, but I facilitate the early career framework as well for a teaching school hub local to me. And I have like 6 ECT groups and 2 mentor groups. So I have a lot. And my second year ECTs it's a delight to see them all meeting each other, every couple of months and being, hey, how are you getting on? Oh, how did you get on with that class? And there's such a huge support to one another, because I think you're right. I think teaching can be a really lonely job, and I think we that's why something like Twitter can be so seductive, because it's like a giant staff room basically.
Yeah, you say that, but I avoid staff rooms for my own reason. Okay, right. So where we're at in terms of ITT now. So providers have had to get reaccreditation, and am I right in thinking that if they're not accredited now, that's it?
Well, that's a good question, and we're lucky enough at Sunderland to have been reaccredited in the first round. So I don't know what will happen, but I think some universities are appealing.
Okay.
I think also they may be given the opportunity to team up with bigger institutions. But again, I can't say with certainty for that, because thankfully.
You got it in the first round. Wow. I know loads of people, loads of providers locally, really good providers locally, who didn't get it till the second round. So that's interesting.
I mean,
yeah,
it seems like a bit of a lottery, to be honest.
Yeah, I couldn't see a rhyme or reason either, but I wasn't kind of involved in any of that, but it was certainly interesting as a professional mentor myself to just watch that kind of unfold. So for these ITT providers, for most of them, they are in the post-accreditation world. Let's assume we're talking about people who've got reaccredited. So what are the next steps now for those providers?
Well, we now have to apply for the second round of reaccreditation. So it's sort of a 2-parter. So the first part was very much kind of setting out in brief what you were going to do around sort of 3 or 4 key areas. So your partnerships, your mentoring. And then the second round is going into a lot more granular detail of the nitty gritty. So I think that's sort of due in around February, March, I think. So obviously that will be the next thing that the providers are working on.
What, and then they're just going to keep applying for reaccreditation, and then
Yeah, that's it. So this
we're
is
going to boot camp, then we're going to go to the live finals.
yeah, I mean, maybe a bush tucker trial, who knows? Bush tucker trial, I would have rather have eaten kangaroo testicles, I think, at some point than fill in a lot of the paperwork I've had to.
Yeah, I think I could have given that a go, actually.
But yeah,
So,
I mean, it's two parts. We've done the first part. We're on to the second part now. And again, I'm unsure as to what the next steps are. If you don't get through this, I guess that's it, game over, because they're leaving it quite late now. But yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. It's really interesting because lots of big organisations got accredited in the first round. So I'm thinking organisations like Ambition Institute got accredited in the first round. Do you feel like there's possibly an agenda around who is going to be delivering ITT moving forwards? Do you think there's a government sense or a government momentum that it's going to be more of a business model and less academic?
Look, I mean, I can't begin to imagine what the rationale is, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. There's a lot of very angry academics out there, and I get it. They feel like the rug has been pulled under them. They feel like the sort of everything is against them. But look, perhaps I'm naive. I think there's room out there for all sorts of different providers, in my opinion. And I don't go in for conspiracy theories. I think we've all got to work together.
Yeah, and competition is great because everyone's going to raise their game. We're going to have a better experience. There's going to be a real market for people to choose from in terms of the best option for them for ITT. So I can only look at that as somebody that works with lots of providers to be good for everybody.
I mean, look, we're all collaborating. I run a Google Classroom space for those who are, leading mentoring at scale in ITT like I am. And, it's friendly. We're all collaborating. There's people in there from HE. There's people in there from the National Institute of Teaching. We're all working together because at the end of the day, what we're all in this for is to get the most effective teachers to stay in classrooms.
Absolutely, yeah.
Make the difference to kids. So, I don't go in for kind of, conspiracy theories and prog versus trad and binary silly debates. We're all in this to get the best outcomes for our kids at the end of the day. And if this is what we need to do to ensure that our trainees have got the consistency that they need to become effective teachers, then, it's been a painful process, but I understand the rationale.
Oh, Hailey, that was an expert answer in not taking sides. But you're right, because there's so many
Sides, like I always say,
yeah,
because there's the shades of grey. Teaching isn't binary.
yeah.
All somewhere in the middle, and I am proud to sit in the middle, to be honest, and not go in for these kind of silly arguments.
Because there's enough things to divide. There's enough things to divide people, society, the world generally, without us, I suppose, actively participating in that. And you're right, like we're in it together. So if you think about, I'm thinking about where I am based. So I teach in Stoke-on-Trent. Well, Stoke-on-Trent's a high area of need in terms of teachers, and there's specific challenges in working in what is essentially an area of deprivation. I just want the city to succeed. I'm not perhaps in a position to take over the country, but the city, that is something that I can probably have an impact on just through good quality ITT experiences.
Well, that's it. I mean, and I think it's Johnny Utley, the CEO of Teal Trust in the North East. He says very often, if you don't want your neighbouring school to do well, then actually you're not doing your job properly, because
Yeah.
we want all of our young people in that area to do well. And that's why, I think the problem comes from the fact that, education has been marketised with neoliberalism for the last 20 years, and it's this kind of competition culture that I don't think there needs to be. But perhaps I'm naive. I've been in ITT for 2.5 minutes, and some people who've been working it for 20 years have forgotten more than I know. So perhaps I'm naive, but I don't need to, cause kind of a fuss by intimating that there's some kind of conspiracy theory. That's
I mean, perhaps you're naive, or perhaps you're a fundamentally decent person fighting the good fight. I'm just going to let you figure that out. So, in terms of ITTs, the role of mentors is going to be key, and this is something that you've done quite a lot of research on. So, what do you think the implications for mentors are in moving forwards in the post-accreditation world?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be serious challenges, I think, for mentors ahead, not least with workload. So we're already seeing mentors sort of complaining, quite rightly, that their workload has kind of quadrupled. A lot of our mentors are mentors in both the early career framework and to ITTE in the core content framework as well.
Yeah.
Previously, I think it was a lot of people became mentors because they wanted to give something back, but a lot of their role was very much as a cheerleader, somebody to give advice. Is that trust kind of relationships, those soft skills, if you like. And of course, they're still really important in mentoring, because without those, you're not a mentor. But education is very much going more along kind of a coaching route now,
Yeah.
in terms of mentoring and sort of getting from A to B. And I think that's a big shift change for mentors, and it means that mentors have to be aware and be conversant with all of the evidence base that underpins the core content framework, which may have changed quite a lot since they trained. They may have to be aware of kind of practices, soft skills that may have been more appropriate usually with coaching or particular forms of coaching, and might not have been part of their repertoire as a mentor. So it's a big learning curve for them. But not just that, it's the workload. It's absolutely huge, and the reaccreditation is going to make the workload even bigger, because all mentors who mentor ITT will be required to attend 20 hours of training a year from 2024, and that's just for being an ITT mentor.
Wow.
Mentor, it'll be 24 hours. So that on top of early career framework, and I speak to hundreds of mentors every single week, and a lot of them are telling me that they're not getting any time off timetable, and the Department for Education is paying for time off timetable for ECT mentors. So they should be getting an hour a week for first year ECTs and an hour a fortnight for second. But a lot of mentors aren't getting that because the DfE are paying the money to schools retrospectively. So obviously schools have got a lot of budget constraints at the moment, a lot of cover implications. Like I'm not pointing the finger at schools. I completely and utterly get it. I've been
Yeah.
I understand. But on the other hand, that is sort of trainees' statutory entitlement, is for their mentors to have that time off to work with them, and the schools are being paid for it.
Yeah, and the thing I really do like about the ECF is that the role of the mentor has been raised, and I think you make this point in your book that actually teachers want to give support. Teachers are inherently kind of knowledge rich, experience rich, but actually they need the time and they need the resources in order to be able to impart that successfully.
Yeah, I mean, it's Professor Rachel Lofthauser who often refers to mentors as kind of the Cinderella profession, because, very often for years and years, they were sort of in the background doing all the hard graft, kind of propping up teacher development with little thanks, little prestige, little status. And the good thing about the early career framework and the core content framework is that, mentors have very much been cast into the limelight. Their really important role has been highlighted. We have an MPQ that is especially for mentors. We have the Chartered College, who are currently developing a chartered mentor status, which I've been thrilled to be on the expert panel for. So, we have a real sea change and a focus shift on mentors and how important they are. And I think that has come from the ECF. Has the ECF got problems? Yes. But I think that any wide shifting, huge change in policy or direction is going to have problems.
Yeah, I mean, mentoring is such skilled work, and I don't know until recently when we've shifted to this instructional coaching model. Actually, for some experienced staff, they find that really hard because what they want to do is fix. And, teachers are great fixers. We're very selfless. We want to, we want you to get it right. Do you think instructional coaching, the kind of gym night model, is here to stay as a means to upskill ECTs and ITTs?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I want to go back to the fact that you've called it gym nights model. I think a lot of the instructional coaching that we're seeing going on isn't necessarily like gym nights version of instructional coaching at all. I think there's many different types of instructional coaching. We have kind of a more dialogic brand of instructional coaching, which is more like gym nights version, where it's two kind of teachers working together, with nobody kind of being the boss or, telling somebody what their targets are or how to develop. And then we have more of a directive model, sort of a see it, name it, do it, Paul Bambrick-Santoyo model. There's a lot of dichotomy between those. There's a lot of quite heated debate and discussion on Twitter about, which of those has more fidelity, which is more effective. And sort of my response would be to that I think we do both of those things naturally. As a skilled mentor or coach, there are times when we will absolutely be a sage on the stage because perhaps the ECT or trainee that we're working with is struggling to reflect, and with the best will in the world, sometimes they don't know what they don't know, and they will need your help as an expert colleague to refine what they need to work on. That doesn't mean you have to tell them, but if you've been sort of having a dialogue for 10-15 minutes and you're at a time constraint, then we can't labour the point. We've got to get from A to B and look at what we need to do to get better. And there will be times when you are a guide on the side, and that might happen in the same meeting, it might happen in the same year. I think a one-size-fits-all of kind of mentoring or coaching doesn't really work and doesn't exist. We've got to be responsive and adaptive. And many people, you used Ambition Institute as a example before, and many people kind of comment on their brand of sort of mentoring being quite directive. Actually, if you actually read Step Lab's responsive coaching model, it's not directive at all, because it does allow for that professional knowledge of the mentor or the coach as to having different levels of support, and if your mentee is like this and does this, then do this. So it is very responsive, as is Bambrick-Santoyo's model. So I think people look at it and they look at what it looks like on the tin, and they've not actually looked at it properly. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a controversial subject at the moment. I do think perhaps this coaching model is here to stay for now. Who knows in education? You're probably like me. You've seen things go round, come back again, with a different name usually.
Yeah.
So who knows in education? Things can be quite faddish and short-lived. But I do think coaching, as Kraft, Blazar and Hogan uncovered, coaching has a real tangible effect size in not only teacher development but pupil progress. But for me, coaching takes a long time to embed properly in a school. It isn't just a silver bullet that you can go, right, we're all doing coaching now. Rachel Ball, I don't know whether any of you follow her on Twitter, she's brilliant, but she's really embedded coaching at scale in her school in Manchester, and it's taken years, like literally years, and she's only just getting to the point now where she's starting to see progress with it. So and
this can be a barrier, can't it? But it's too easy, I think, in our profession to say, oh, it takes too long to embed, or we've got to be faster, because if you get it right, it will pay dividends, won't it?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the thing. I think education is terrible for poor implementation, and obviously that's something that the EF picked up on, and did their implementation guide, did their PD report with the different mechanisms, and it's something we do quite badly in education, and I get it, like I understand why we do it badly, and the reason why is because we're working in a really high stakes environment where we are really doing things for the good of children, and time is of the essence there. We can't mess about, but at the same time we shouldn't be able to just do kind of knee-jerk decisions and look for silver bullets, because even people like Dylan Williams say something works somewhere, but not everything will work everywhere, and it doesn't.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. And if you haven't checked out their new releases, don't miss out. You can visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Also, a message from the Witherslack Group. They are a leading provider of specialist education and care, and they need people and teachers like you to help them achieve even more. At Witherslack, you'll be given all the resources and support you'll need, offered a clear path to career progression, and rewarded with some of the best salaries and benefits the industry has to offer. Witherslack currently have some fantastic career opportunities available to apply for at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk/careers. If you've just joined us, I've been talking to the mighty Hayley Hughes about all things ITT. Absolutely sensational CPD from a very selfish point of view. Hayley really has got some incredible knowledge on ITT and mentoring. She is the author of the best-selling How to Mentor in Schools, and she has shared tons of wisdom with us tonight. And even though I still can't hear you, Hayley, I hope that you are there and you can come back and talk to us in a second. You could be muted, possibly from maybe from the news. You may need to call through again, but I'm here whenever you're ready to talk to us again. So we've been talking to Hayley about her experience with ITT. Hayley, are you there?
Should be, hopefully. Can you hear me now?
Yes, and I can hear you louder now than I could before. So what that was, it's a win. So we've been talking about mentoring. We've been talking about ITT. We've been talking about the national teacher shortage and the kind of DFE response to that. So just before we continue, I'd be interested. We've talked about instructional coaching. We've talked about some of the nuanced models of instructional coaching. We've talked about how that's here in the kind of short term, but I'd just be interested from your point of view, what is it that makes a good mentor?
Oh God, it's massive. So I mean, if we start off with kind of soft skills, obviously I think the active listening skills are really important. I think the ability to realize that actually you're not developing carbon copies of yourself, the right sort of balance between support and challenge is really important. The ability to set really granular targets, to articulate the sort of how to get from A to B or to improve, as well as the what. The sort of ability to be able to get over the sort of curse of the expert, where you are able to kind of step back and think about the active ingredients of a strategy and how somebody might go about, improving in that particular area. I think you've got to be a facilitator of opportunities, of progress, of signposting to research. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's huge, it's massive. And there's lots of research out there that says that the sort of qualities of an effective teacher are not the same as the qualities of an effective mentor. Obviously, being an effective teacher is important because a massive part of mentoring is modelling and being able to construct and realise what expert practice looks like. But actually, I've known loads of amazing teachers who are bloody awful mentors. And vice versa, loads of excellent mentors who did struggle and have challenges in the classroom. So I think, they are distinct entities, and there's lots of research that backs that up as well. So, I mean, I think what makes a good mentor is a huge question. It's something you could probably talk about for the whole of the rest of the show, really, but it's a mixture of what I would call kind of soft skills, but also that kind of knowledge of up-to-date research and being able to bridge that gap between research and practice and talk about the implications of what that piece of research might look like in the context of your subject, your phase, your school, your context.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you found this, but I find that actually people who are natural teachers for whom seemingly, classroom presence or questioning or building relationships comes to them really naturally, actually find it really hard to work with ECTs and ITTs who, are working towards those things, and they can sort of be like, well, you've either got it or you haven't. I hear that a lot. There's some things you can't give people. Well, yeah, there are, but they're not all equally valuable and equally necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a long time, when we didn't really sort of understand cognitive science and kind of mental models and things like that, and I'm not talking about obviously like psychologists because they've understood it for years. I'm talking about teachers. I'd never heard about phrases like that, before the last few years. I think when we didn't really understand that, what we didn't understand is kind of how sometimes we used to send like NQTs or trainees to go and watch if they were struggling with behaviour, for example. We used to send them to go and like watch a deputy head who was in charge of behaviour whole school, who was absolutely amazing at it. Yeah. And, the gap between where I was as a trainee or an NQT and between the deputy head who I was watching, it actually just made it worse, because I was looking at this person thinking, well, I just can't do that. I can't develop what they've got. They've got a presence that like it's so far away from where I am in terms of my own mental model that it was impossible bridge to cross. And I think we know more about the way people learn now, and we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and that can be disempowering, like unintentionally disempowering, because you can't get to that in a placement, can you? That's like physically impossible.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think we have much more of an understanding of that, and also of kind of targets now as well. Like I remember being given just absolutely ridiculous targets, like, improve your questioning. Well, questioning's huge. It's like telling a Formula One driver to win more races. Like, what does that even mean? So that was a big issue, I think, for too long, is that we had that curse of the expert where we didn't actually necessarily think about breaking that down and making it as granular as possible, so that people had that motivation to be able to see the fact that they were getting better in an incremental, small way.
Absolutely. And this is very much where I'm at with my ITTs at the minute, actually, of trying to be specific about one thing that's going to make a difference, because, where we are in the training at the minute, there's a number of things, understandably, that need to be worked on. And I'm having a bit of a battle with some mentors who want to just fix everything. And I'm trying to explain that isn't going to help in the long run. That isn't the kind of model that's going to be, meaningfully empowering. So thinking about mentors again, what kind of CPD is out there to upskill our mentors for this really important work? Is there anything that you particularly recommend?
Well, I mean, I think there's two pieces to this, really. There's kind of the research and the pedagogy that underpins the CCF and the ECF. And I think those documents in themselves are actually CPD for mentors, because they're broken down into really easily digestible learn that and learn how to statements. And, they are a starter, those, of course, we are saying that our trainees and our ECTs and our mentors need to be critical consumers of research, and that the approaches that are in that are not a one size fits all, but they're the best bets that we have. So, they are the minimum entitlement that all trainees should be getting. So we then build on that with other stuff as well that might be more adaptable to your context. So I would say those two documents are a must read, because they're CPD in themselves. They're a refresher of some of the theory that we might have known and have forgotten, or some new theory. At the end of the CCF and ECF, there's also bibliographies. A lot of them are open access online. You can click on. Some of them aren't open access, and you do need to get behind a paywall to get them, which is very frustrating. But I have made a Google Drive of all of those in that is on my Twitter feed, so people can go and have a look at them. So I would say that's the first form of CPD, really. And then I think there's, ever since COVID, CPD and in sort of professional development in general, there's so much of it out there that it's like a flaming all-you-can-eat buffet. And, sometimes that can be a problem to me, because, pre-gastric sleeve, I used to see all-you-can-eat buffets as a bit of a challenge, to be be honest with you. So I'm a bit like that with PD. I could sit through, reams and reams and probably not get much from it because I've just got notes and notes, but what am I doing with it? So, there's people out there doing great things. I mean, Tom Rogers himself, the founder of Teachers Talk Radio, does an absolutely brilliant Teach Me icons. They're subject specific. He does like leadership ones as well. I spoke at the English one a few months ago and it was one of the best events I've been at for ages. And I think the good thing about those is that when you're a mentor, subject-specific mentoring is massively important. So I think it is important to keep abreast of the implications of some of the research and evidence in your subject, because questioning might look very different in English than it might in science, for example, or might look very different in EYFS than it does in FE. So I think that is really important. And then there's the other piece as well. So we've done kind of the evidence and the pedagogy. There's the other piece as well, which is the teacher development piece. So I think, being able to attend CPD that is around those kind of soft skills of mentoring or perhaps instructional coaching, if that's the approach that people are interested in.
Amazing. And for much of that CPD, it's readily available in the post kind of COVID world, as you said. So if you're hungry for it, to carry on with your kind of analogy, it's there. I'm going to press on with the questions because I'm conscious of time. And I'm going to go to a big one before I ask you to finish some sentences for me. If you had a kind of carte blanche on ITT and you could have unlimited resources to bring your vision to life, what would your systems and structures around ITT, ITE, the ECF, what would it look like from your experience and point of view?
I think it would still be this continuous kind of golden thread that the DFE talk about. I mean, a lot of academics kind of balk at that phrase, but I get where it's coming from. Like I get the heart in it. So I think it would still be that continuous golden thread, but I think what it would be is much more congruence between ITT and the early career framework, because I think there's been, I suppose, this kind of understanding that perhaps ITT were doing a great job, which in my experience is a load of rubbish because they were doing a fantastic job. But perhaps they weren't teaching up to date theories and this, that, and the other. And that they're going to reteach from scratch the theories in the ECF. And I think that's bringing up massive issues. We're seeing a lot of ECT saying, I did all of this last year, and it's not moving my learning on at all, because it is kind of a one size fits all. And if you look at kind of all the research on effective PD, from the EF, etc., and the mechanisms and some of, Harry Fletcher Wood's work the year before, a one size fits all model of PD isn't effective. So why are we doing it again as part of the ECF? It does need to be contextualized. So if I had all the money in the world, I would work much more congruently. I'd get a lot more people round the table in these discussions instead of the same faces, to be honest. Because there's people in, all corners of ITT. You've got a lot to offer. And this is as somebody who has been part of these processes. So my kind of face has been in there really, but I've got brilliant colleagues at lots of different institutions who would have really added to these discussions. So I think that is one thing I would do, and then more time for mentors. Giving them that PPA, more opportunities for them to possibly go on sabbaticals. I would love that, and have them come and work in ITT and teach development for a bit.
Yes.
Swap them with a lecturer. Because a lot of lecturers, a lot of universities are going down the route of asking their lecturers to do a couple of weeks in a school to keep their hand in, so it would be an ideal opportunity. I think we need much more congruence between academics and teachers. It shouldn't be an us versus them, and it sometimes feels like it is a bit like that on Twitter, which leaves me in a very bizarre position because I am a new academic. I very much see myself as a pro-academic. Still as somebody who is kind of rooted in sort of classroom practice, but I'm not a teacher anymore, and that's a bizarre path to tread. I can see that. Okay, just before I go to the sentences to finish,
The ECF, we touched on this earlier. Is this the thing that's going to bring about the change the profession needs? What do you think?
I thought perhaps when it came out, but I'm not so sure anymore. I'm a huge supporter of the ECF. As I say, I facilitate it, I believe in it. But I do think, like any whole-scale kind of policy change, there are teething troubles. I think a lot of the providers, and including the DFE, because I've had lots of meetings with them about the ECF, I think they are listening, and it will be adapted and responsive, but it does need to be, I think, a bit more bespoke to ECT's needs. But how you do that at scale, I have no idea.
Well, if we need some answers, I feel like you're ready to give them. Okay, so I've got a few sentences to finish with that I'd like you to complete. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So as a profession, we need to stop being so
Divisive,
Yes.
tribalistic. Yeah.
Do you want to expand on that? No.
Well, I just think, like, we spending all of our time arguing. Well, the 5% of actual teachers who are on Twitter are spending all of our time actually arguing about trad versus flaming progs, and all the while we're wasting our time. And yeah, it's just a bit childish, to be honest.
You make a good point. You've got me. And secondly, education needs more
people like Mary Myatt.
That's a very specific response.
I just love Mary, and the reason why is because I aspire to be like Mary. She's eminently sensible. She doesn't there's no arrogance with her. She's got an incredible amount to offer. She gives back so much, and she does very much tread that sensible line of, I'm not getting drawn into tribalistic quarters. And there's lots of other people like Mary out there: Johnny Utley, John Tomsett, Tom Sherrington. All of these people are very, they're educators who are very much in the public eye. Professor Sam Twistleton is another, and they don't get involved in really public spats on Twitter. They have class, and I aspire to be like them.
Yeah, who knew that being sensible would be such a trait that's in demand? I mean, yeah. Really. Okay, and then the final sentence that I'd like you to finish for me this evening is: we need to remind ourselves that teachers are
human beings, who have their own children, who have their own issues and challenges, who also went through the COVID-19 pandemic alongside everybody else. I just think we sometimes forget that, and because everybody has been to school, they think they're an expert on school and what teachers do. Yeah. And quite frankly, sort of the press coverage of teachers during the pandemic, and some of the comments that I see on certain accounts on Twitter, I don't know how some teachers manage to keep sane, to be quite honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, I feel like I've learned absolutely tons tonight from you, Hayley. So I can only thank you for fitting us into what is clearly already a very saturated schedule that you've got. And if we're going to go there, you admire Mary Myatt. Well, I admire you, Hayley, and I think that the comments that you've made tonight really remind me what we're in it for. And I think sometimes we need to come back to that core purpose, that actually as a profession we are a team, we are together, and there is real strength in that. So
and we've all got something to offer, all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Be more Hayley is my mantra for the coming week. So a massive thank you for listening this evening. Hopefully you stuck with me during the technical difficulties, of which we will never speak again. This time next week, we've got Sarah Langdon, who's going to be delivering the Late Late Show, and I will be back the following Monday for my last show before Christmas. in which I'm going to be talking to somebody very important. And I wish I could tell you more, but I haven't confirmed it with them yet. So I'm just going to be non-committal. Hailey, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us about the future of ITT? Is it looking bright? Is it a positive picture? Can we be optimistic?
I think there's lots to be optimistic about. I think, there's lots of challenges that we've got to overcome. But, if those of us who are training the next generation of teachers aren't optimistic, then there's not much hope, is there? So, I think we have to keep fighting the good fight for the good of all of our kids.
Absolutely. Could not say it better myself. Okay. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been brilliant to share an hour with you. And thanks again to Hailey, who has shared her wisdom with us so generously. So a massive, massive thank you. I will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for listening.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.